Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Nightstalker Podcast. Before we begin the episode, I have to make a disclaimer due to the nature of the topics we will be talking about on the show. Please note that we will be talking about cruelty and violence that may offend some people, as well as religious context and imagery that may be inappropriate to some. Thank you for listening, and enjoy as we dive into our first episode of our podcast.
Good evening. Welcome to our podcast. This is your host, the Nightstalker.
And the Professor.
All right. Well, you know, episode 1 is on Halloween.
We're actually doing it, dude.
I know. I actually can't believe we finally, stuck true to something.
Right? We've been talking about this idea for how many months and finally getting it together.
Actually, to be fair, I think it only took us like a month and a half to get going, which isn't bad considering most of our ideas like camping is like 2 years we planned and haven't done it. So,
well, we did plan, but then everyone planned against us.
That is kind of true. Like we had a plan, and then everyone else fell through with the plan, and then we were just like, so camping in the backyard, right? Like
yes, s'mores. That was lit.
That was actually pretty lit. Not gonna lie. Well, let me ask you this: when you think of Halloween, what comes to your head?
Candy.
Candy?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm actually not surprised by that. For me, it's dressing up. Like, I like, not like regular costumes, like when I like to dress up, or when I did, like, I used to think of it as like cosplay. Mm-hmm. Like, if I'm gonna go out as a character, I'm gonna try to fully commit, not just like, some little like, like Party City, like, nothing like that. Like, I'm actually gonna like, try my best to look in character as best as possible.
Yeah, the spirit of, costumes is that you become the character.
Very true. Yeah, no, very true. But do you know, and I wonder if anyone listening knows where Halloween actually really comes from?
Well, I remember learning about All Saints Day, which is when the souls of the deceased come back to the land of the living, and people can meet up with their lost loved ones or family and spend some time together before they have to go back.
You're actually not wrong about that. That comes from when the Catholics, or I should say the Romans, when they were trying to conquer what is now considered to be like, Britain and Scotland, when they came over there to adopt the people into, to integrate them in, what they did is they took their traditions and kind of like blended it to their own. And that's where All Saints Day comes from. However, if we're going all the way back, so, we're going old school OG Halloween, is actually called Samhain.
Samhain?
It's Samhain. This comes from like the 3rd, I'm going to say the 3rd BC. There's no like real definite date. They say the 2nd, the 3rd BC. So we're talking really, really old, But it's called Samhain, which if anyone listening wants to actually look this up, it's not how it sounds. It's actually going to be spelled Samhain. So totally looks different than how it's pronounced. It's pronounced Samhain. But the way it's spelled, it's like Samhain or like, Samhain.
Isn't English such a great language?
Right? Just like so many dialects within English alone.
So where does Samhain originate from?
So Samhain comes from the ancient, I guess it wouldn't be too ancient, but like we're talking the Celtic Druids back in that area of what would be now considered, you can call, Scotland or wherever the Celts are from. I'm not like the best with geography, but they're Celtic. Pretty much what that night was for them was, it was the time where the dead would rise and they would try to pass on to the netherworld. And there was a theme what they called the Veil. And the Veil, this is when it opened up. So the souls that had passed would then be able to go through that veil and into the afterlife. And their Dark Lord, Samhain, on that night would be on the hunt for souls. And if he found them, he'd pretty much just grab them and take them to the world of darkness. Now, what a lot of people don't know is these Celtic Druids, there's not much information on them Like, you can try to Google them and stuff, and it's not like there's, like, a bunch of information on, like, who they were and stuff. Like, you'll just see the generic, like, oh, they were philosophers, they were religious leaders. But, truth be told, they were probably the first Luciferian/occultic leaders. Because part of their tradition of Samhain was about sacrifice. Because, Samhain itself is pretty much translated to Summer's End, which took place on November 1st. And on May 1st, they have what was called like Beltane, which was Summer's Beginning. So when Samhain would come, or Summer's End, that's when they figured, okay, anyone who died during this time is going to rise, and they're going to try to make their journey onto the Netherworld and the Dark Lord Samhain, which is going to go on the hunt for them.
Interesting. I actually heard of Samhain and Beltane now that you mention it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was about fairies. Like, there are two kind of different courts for fairies, the summer court and the winter court.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was on like Samhain and Beltane that they would like switch off.
So I'm guessing, was this also within like Celtic Rue, or like did it kind of say like where it came from? I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't know jack about fairies. That's not my expertise.
I think it was from the same general area. I think it was less Scottish and more
Irish,
more like English.
Okay, I thought maybe the Irish. Like
maybe Irish.
I always felt like the Irish had something with fairies. Like, just like, oh, lads, don't go into the bush, eh? You get tricked with the fairies. It's just kind of like, all right, Grandpa's being crazy again.
It's cool how that general region, the whole like Britain and Ireland and Scotland,
mm-hmm.
they kind of originated the whole concept of high fantasy and all those tropes. With the, knights and archers and fairies and dragons.
I know, dude. I've seen Braveheart.
Yeah.
Good movie. But I can believe it's probably from that area if they believe in Beltane and Samhain. But, to go more in depth of what they did, though, on Samhain was that night they would want to honor, the Dark Lord Samhain. So what they would do is they would go around to in their villages, because the Celtic Druids, like, they're actually talked about in Julius Caesar's book. Like I said, there's not much on them. However, Julius Caesar talked about them in his book, The Gallic War, which, if anyone's interested, I think you could literally go on Amazon and it's like less than $10.
Gallic or Gaelic?
It's Gallic.
Oh, Gallic, yeah.
So it is Gallic. I read it as garlic at first, but like I'm pretty sure Caesar didn't fight in the Garlic War. But what was I gonna say? So he did write about them in it. He just was very brief, just like, in their communities, like they were honored by the people. They were definitely in charge of the religion. And he talked about it, like, they were, like, into astronomy and, like, philosophy. But he did say, this is in the book accordingly, that they were in charge of public and private sacrifices. So, seems like they were pretty much all about that human sacrifice. I don't know if it was year-round. I don't know if they just did on Samhain. I wasn't there, so I can't really give you guys an eyewitness testimony. But there is a quote from... How's this pronounced? Because I'm afraid I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Annals. That's a book.
Annals?
Yeah, it's a book.
Annals.
Yeah, Annals. Try to keep it clean.
Annals.
So in this book, I forget the guy who wrote it, some old Roman, but there's a quote from it talking about them. It was their religion to drench their altars in blood of prisoners and consult their gods by the means of human entrails. So yeah. These guys were pretty pagan, pretty heretics, in my opinion.
Well, that was kind of the hallmark of old societies and old, religion, like the Aztecs and the Mayans and, all those other, like, tribalistic societies. They would always do their sacrifices.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like, it all goes back to paganism and the effect it had on different cultures. I mean, you can bring up any ancient culture, and there's ties to not just paganism, but like the occult. It's all there. It's really, like, I won't get into it now. We're going to try to focus on Halloween here, but like, believe me when I say the occult runs deep. Mm-hmm. And when I mean deep, I mean deep. I mean, you take any ancient civilization and you will find the roots of the occult in there somewhere. I mean, like, human sacrifice is probably the biggest giveaway, you know. And for anyone, you know, who's listening who knows the Bible and they're like, oh, well, what about when people used to sacrifice lambs? It's like, yeah, that was a thing. It definitely changed after Jesus. You know, he was the final sacrificial lamb. But, like, it wasn't like, okay, we need to just kill, you know, sacrifice humans. So, like, it was just a lamb. Where these other places, it was all about human sacrifice. And also, the ways they did it, it's not, I mean, there's really no good way to sacrifice a human. But, I mean, like, it's not just like, oh, they just put them to sleep, you know? Like, we're talking some type of, like, horrible death.
Well, for them, it probably wasn't as bad. Like, they would find honor in sacrificing themselves for what they believe in, for the gods, and, you know, for what they believe in.
Yeah, but, I mean, like, you know, like I said, the occult runs deep. We'll get into that another time. We'll, focus more on just Samhain and Halloween. So
you were talking about how the Dark Lord Samhain would collect souls and that they'd have a death veil.
Yeah, so it was.
I didn't know they had Harry Potter back then.
You know, the Dementors were just out. You know, if you were in the village, you know, I hope your Patronus game was strong. No, I mean, like, so Samhain came out for the lost souls who were out there, but at the same time, the people were afraid of the souls that were out there because, you know, preparing for Samhain, the druids would go in their communities or the villages and, you know, pretty much be like, hey, do you got any animals you want to sacrifice? You got any humans you want to sacrifice? And if you contribute, you know, you're going to see some prosperity this year. You know, your crops are going to be good. You know, your 401k is going to go up. You know, all that good jazz. And then, you know, I don't know how many people did, but, you know, people would be like, okay, yeah, let me give you a chicken, or, you know, my daughter's been a pain in the butt. So, they would do that, but then the people who were just like, nah, fam, I'm good, they were pretty much like, oh, you're going to be cursed, or you're going to be tormented, you know, this and that. So, it was a real catch-22 there.
So, you're saying that who was it? The Celtic Druids?
Celtic Druids.
Introduced this idea of a god Samhain that goes and collects souls on, you know, on, what was it, November 1st?
Yeah, so Samhain is supposed to be around November 1st, and then, of course, Beltane was, like, May 1st, and it was all about summer's beginning, summer's end. So, yeah, Samhain was summer's end, and it was, like, November 1st, and that was the day they're like, all right, you know, the souls are going to rise up, and, you know, we got to honor Lord Samhain or Lucifer.
So how did it become Samhain to Halloween? How did that change occur?
Let me just, I'll just finish up on what they did on Samhain, then I'll get to that. So pretty much on Samhain, you know, they would have human sacrifices, animal sacrifices. You know, they would try to honor Lord Samhain with that, and they would also try to appease the spirits, because they were also terrified that, like, these spirits were just going to try to possess them. Like, you know, they're now in our world, we can technically talk with them now on this night. Maybe they don't want to go, so, you know, they're going to possess you. So, you know, by doing that, they were hoping that, you know, they could honor not just Samhain, but the lost souls as well. And we actually get a lot of our actual traditions of Halloween from this night, from a lot of that. Let's see here. Pretty much the whole idea of trick-or-treat comes from people wanting to appease these spirits because they don't want them to possess them. So what they would do is they would make food and leave it out for them, and, you know, they leave little treats as well. I even read something about shelters. I don't know, like, how you would, you know, offer shelter to, like, a lost soul. I don't really know.
Maybe like a lazy boy chair, and maybe like a coffee table and like a coffee maker on it.
Just like, yeah, I got the Keurig all set up. You'll be good. But, you know, their hope was that the spirits would be pleased. But if they weren't, then, you know, they would torment them and trick them and stuff. So that's where the whole idea of trick or treat comes from. It was, you know, they're going to get their treats, and if they don't, they're going to trick the living in some way, shape, or form.
So when children dress up and go house to house asking for candy, it's basically just them pretending to be souls going around and asking for treats.
Yeah, and that's kind of the complexity of it. I was thinking about that, looking into it, how this occultic practice of, lost souls and human sacrifice is, like, implemented today. And it's like, yeah, it's really, really sugar-coated, but it's still kind of there. I'm not going to preach to anybody on, like, whether, they want to participate or not. But it is weird to think about that, like, kids come around dressed up in costumes, and they could be any theme from, like, Iron Man to, Optimus Prime to, Elsa. But, like, when they show up, you're just kind of like, it's weird. Like, they're actually, like, mimicking the lost souls that, these ancient druids used to think of back in the day. So, I don't know, it's just kind of weird. Like, it even made me kind of think, because I know at work they want us to dress up, and even I'm kind of like, I don't really know if I want to dress up, to be quite honest with you. But that's a whole different story. I'm not going to tell people whether they should celebrate it or not. You do what you think is right. However, I will tell you this, though, besides trick-or-treating, jack-o'-lanterns, maybe it's self-explanation here, but like, what the Celtic Druids used to do was behead people, because they viewed the head as the most important part of the human body, because they thought that the soul resided in the head. So what they would do is they would decorate not just, their homes, but, the ceremony places with just bloodied severed heads everywhere. And, the pumpkins, most of them have, of course, like a jack-o'-lantern face. It's, to, look like a human head. Used to be pretty brutal back in the BC.
The idea of pumpkin heads replacing regular heads are from way back. Like the Legend of Sleepy Hollow is a popular example of it in the semi-modern, day.
Yeah. And trying to think, there was one more thing. Oh, and then of course costumes itself. Like, what's the main part of Halloween? Costumes itself, the Celtic druids and the villagers, those who weren't sacrificed, their whole fear was about being possessed by these souls. So that's where dressing up came from. They tried to mimic looking like evil spirits, so that when these spirits were coming down the way, they'd be like, oh, they're part of the club, keep going. And, they'd be left alone. So that's where dressing up really comes from.
The bedsheet ghost doesn't sound like a bad idea anymore, does it?
Right. So that's pretty much where the traditions come from, is from Samhain, and most of it really comes out of fear. Think about it. They were afraid of being possessed, and they were afraid of being sacrificed. That's why they were like, they actually offered up sacrifices, like their livestock, or if they just had someone in the house they just didn't want there, they just offer them up just so that they wouldn't be offered up,
So we went from Samhain and all the traditions that we've kept from that period of time, but how did it change from Samhain to Halloween?
Well, I was going to say, so that was like, 2nd, 3rd BC if you want to round it. So around the 7th century, this is when the Romans were, expanding their empire, and they came into the area. And, you can read this, most of their quote-unquote barbarians that they fought were mainly from this area. Pope Gregory I was, the Pope at the time, and he was like, okay, to convert these people in here, we gotta take the traditions and we gotta, just kind of blend it to our will here so that, they just convert, with us. Instead of actually getting rid of, actual pagan ideas to implement Christ, the Pope just adopted their ideas. So Beltane became All Saints' Day. And it was like that for a while, so years later, I don't know how many years later, but Pope Gregory III decided to move Beltane, or All Saints' Day, to November 1st. So they did away with Beltane altogether, or, summer's beginning, and they just moved All Saints' Day that they implemented to November 1st. And the reason for that was on that day, instead of being all pagan and like, oh, we're gonna, worship the dead and their passage. They were like, oh, we're going to honor all the saints that have passed, Everyone who was a saint, those known and not known, we're going to honor them. So that's November 1st, though. What would be the 31st of October would be All Hallows Eve. Hallow, as a noun, means saint. So All Saints Eve or All Hallows Eve eventually conjoined to Halloween, because hallow means saint, and een, E-E-N, is eve or evening before, and that's where you get Halloween. But, that's how, Halloween came to be. But, of course, on November 1st itself, in, a lot of Latin American countries, that's where you get Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead. So they still have their tradition of honoring the dead who have passed and their passage onto the next world. I mean, there's a Pixar movie about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it called? Coco?
Coco, yeah.
Coco.
So that whole movie is about Dia de los Muertos. And like I said, it's kind of funny to think about that. This movie that has, kind of a big occultic background is a kid's movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course they're not focusing on the sacrifices and the souls and the possession, but they're focusing on the family the virtues.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I mean, but at the same time, I don't know. This is just how I view it. You take a step back from something you think you know, and you get the background in on it, and if, let's just say everyone knew where Halloween came from and, Samhain and all this, if everyone really knew where it came from, would we still want to implement it in society? I mean, not to sound like some old man, but I mean, it's just, I don't know, my whole thing is, if something has an occultic background, I don't really care how much you sugarcoat it, it still has occultic roots, and I just personally am not sure if I would want to partake in something that has huge occultic roots. I mean, that's just me personally. I mean, I ain't preaching to anyone listening. You want to dress up, or if you have kids and you go trick-or-treating and you feel fine, then, by all means, you do you, boo-boo. But I always like to take a look at the picture from the back. I step away and I look at the whole picture. And knowing something has occultic roots is just, I don't know, like I said, it's just weird to think about. And it's just well, if it has such a big occultic root, should we celebrate it? I don't know. That's just how I see it.
I feel like if we ask this to ourselves about Halloween, we would also have to ask about Christmas. Because I feel like...
Oh, get ready for the Christmas episode.
The Christmas-ine episode?
The Christmas-ine? Yeah, get ready for the Christmas episode, because we got a lot of occultic background on that as well. I'm not going to get into it. I mean, I'll give you guys this. It ain't Jesus' birthday, it's Nimrod's birthday. So you are more than welcome to research who Nimrod was. But yeah, not Jesus' birthday. So we will have a Christmas episode. But yeah, before that, back to Halloween. Yeah, so that's where Halloween got the name, is Hallows Eve, Oh, they used to actually call it as well, Feast of All Saints was another word that they gave it. But yeah, that's how it became Halloween. They had to move it from the roots of the Celtic Druids when they got there, and then instead of just getting rid of it, they were like, okay, it's All Saints Day, and then instead of having All Saints Day in Samhain, they decided to move it to that same day. And then of course some places Latin America, they have Dia de los Muertos, and then of course the Catholics. I think the Catholics still call it All Saints Day.
They do, but they only call that November 1st.
Okay, yeah. They don't look at the eve before, but they do still have All Saints Day technically. Yes. And then of course everywhere, not everywhere, but of course you got Halloween that is I would say pretty big. I think Halloween's definitely pretty big. Yeah, that's pretty much where it comes from. And there's some things when looking into it that I found kind of interesting. So back to Samhain, some of their human sacrifices, the biggest way they did it was by fire. They would make huge wicker cages, just like the Wicker Man. So what they used to do is they would throw humans, animals in these huge wicker cages, and, set them on fire. And that's where the term bonfire comes from. Because once everything was all burnt, all that was left was bones. So it was actually called bonefire. So that is where the term bonfire comes from. So all you Dark Souls players, Dark Souls has gotten even darker.
I mean, well, in a game like Dark Souls, that's not really as surprising.
Yeah, I mean, you play Dark Souls, it's like, if you're playing Dark Souls, you're really just a masochist in disguise. Yeah. But, I looked into Halloween and just, the modern day and stuff, and I found a quote from Johanna Michelson. She is an ex-occultist person who wrote the book, like Lambs to the Slaughter, and she said Halloween is also a prime recruiting season for Satanists. So, that's why another thing about Halloween is in today's world, it's just it seems that Satanists and occultists, while people are taking their kids out for trick-or-treating, are probably performing some type of weird ritual somewhere. And, whether it involves actual humans, I don't know. I would hope not. But animals could be. I mean, I'm pretty sure around this time, they tell people if you have, an all-black cat or maybe an all-black dog, keep them indoors. Don't let them loose because they could get picked up and, sacrificed because people are crazy.
I mean, humans in general are already way cruel to animals.
Yeah, have you met PETA?
Yeah.
You need a punching bag. You just add PETA in there and it's a guaranteed win.
Cell win.
It's a cell win. And then something else. So there was a satanic high priestess named Blanche Barton. She talked about Halloween. She was like, it gives the most mundane people the opportunity to taste wickedness for one night. They have a chance to dance with the devil. I see Satanists all over the world meeting in small groups this night and Halloweens 500 years hence to raise a glass to the infernal hosts. So, I mean, when it comes to these crazy people, like the Satanists and the Luciferians and occultists and, whatever they are, who knows what really goes on Halloween or, November 1st. I don't know if there's anything about, sacrifices or if they try to initiate people into their clubs on these days, And if anyone out there wants to reach us, by the way, you can reach us via our email, or we're going to also have an Instagram you can message us on, but our email will just be nightstalkerpodcast@gmail.com.
That is Nightstalker Podcast, NIGHTSTALKERPODCAST at gmail.com.
Thank you for that, Professor.
Well, it might be different. We don't have any visual clues on what it is. It could be NITE for all they know.
Well, we just spell everything hecka weird just to be hip. Just that's Nightstalker at KNEI. Just wait, what?
KNITE.
Stalker at STAKZ. Just wait, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't even sound
the Z is silent.
Z silent,
At AOL.com.
Just use the oldest form of email. Just actually, we have a telegram system that
we
you
have
can
a P.O. box.
We have carrier pigeons if you would like to reach us.
Just reach your hand into the sky and invoke the name Nightstalker. That is NITESTAKR.
Okay, I think they got it the first time. We do use smoke signals just in case. But who knows what these crazy people do out there. And that's what, like I said, it got me thinking, if there are these Satanists out there, and I'm going to go on a little tangent here just about the Satanists. I've seen their Twitter and just, memes where it's just oh, look, the Satanists, they care about equality, and they care about human rights, and this and that. And I'm okay, these people literally follow Lucifer, Satan. They are open that is who they follow. But then try going, no, we don't really follow that person. It's just us being rebellious. And I'm just kind of like, okay, that's like meeting a Nazi who's just like, no, I'm just being rebellious.
Hey man, well, let's not go into Nazi territory.
Well, I mean, like, what's worse, a Nazi or a Satanist? I mean, same thing in my book. I mean, come on now. But, that's just why I kind of laugh when people are like, oh, like, the Satanists aren't really that crazy or this and that. I'm like, okay, they're building, like, statues and temples in cities. Like, wasn't it somewhere in Arkansas or Arkansas, as some people might call it, that where they, like, I don't know if it was the capital, but they, like, actually had, like a goat statue, like, put up, and they're like, well, we can technically put it up because we're an actual, like, church and this and that, and it's just kind of like, come on now, like, how are we allowing this?
I mean, we allowed a giant spaghetti monster to be the patron god of a church, the Pastafarians.
I thought that was a joke.
No, it's true.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh god.
You don't know the word of the giant flying spaghetti monster?
No, I know what the flying spaghetti monster is. I didn't know what would you call it? Something foreigners?
Pastafarians.
I didn't know Pastafarians was an actual thing. I thought that was just a meme. I thought it was something related to Italians.
No, man, it's true.
Oh, man. But, that's pretty much all there is to know about Halloween and where it comes from. I mean, just to wrap it all up, I mean, it comes from Samhain. And then, of course, the Catholics, and the Romans, they, tried to bring them into their culture, but by adapting the old tradition and just bending it, and then, throughout the years, it became what it is now. You get dressed up, you go out for trick-or-treating, you go to Halloween parties, and, that's just where we're at today with all of it, So, Nightstalker. Yeah.
Tell me, what else does this podcast talk about? Like, what's our MO?
So, like, for all you listening, obviously the next episode will not be on Halloween. We'll focus just mainly on the supernatural. Anything that goes bump in the night, we'll cover. We might
like
talk...
me without the lights on?
Yeah, I've actually witnessed that before. It's quite hilarious. Or me waking up... running to the bathroom and tripping over something that wasn't there before.
You gotta watch out where you put those Legos, man.
Excuse me, I am not 12 anymore. But no, we'll cover just the supernatural. We'll tie it into a biblical sense. The Bible's got a lot of stuff to say about, a lot of cultures and... we'll talk about different cultures and the different monsters they have, the different type of, holidays they have. I know, we brought up today, Latin America has Dia de los Muertos, and if someone was like, I wonder where that comes from, you trace it all the way back to Samhain, So if we find out if there's, another holiday in a different culture, or if they have, their own, monsters or something, if we can somehow tie it back to, a biblical sense, yeah, we'll show you... we'll talk about different things, anything supernatural, anything maybe horror related, maybe we'll talk about horror movies one day. Maybe we'll watch and stream a horror movie and review it while watching it. That'd be kind of dope. I mean, maybe. Just maybe.
I'm pretty weak to horror movies, my dude.
Oh, come on!
No, man, I'm a big chicken.
Oh, man. Well, maybe I'll do a solo episode.
So yeah, if you listeners want to get into this action... Mm-hmm. Message us your horror stories, your ghost stories, your cryptozoological beasts that are prevalent in your own culture or things you've heard about.
So yeah, you can find us on Instagram at Nightstalker Podcast. At Instagram, I'll be honest, I'm new to it.
We both are.
Both of us, we're not very social beings.
I mean, we started a podcast talking about ghost stories.
Yeah, you can tell that, we're a little different. So, yeah, thank you for tuning in. We'll have more for you next week. Anyone out there, though, who, whether you are trick-or-treating... or if you are home alone watching horror movies, or if you might be in some type of paranormal presence, I actually want to share a psalm with you. And it's kind of cool. This is our first episode, and it's actually my favorite psalm, Psalm 23. If you guys need a little courage for the night. Where is it now?
So what you want to do is, if you need a little courage, you want to go home, open up a nice bottle of whiskey, pour yourself a shot, and just take it.
It also helps in the winter if you're trying to stay warm before going to bed. I'm not encouraging anyone to get drunk, but one shot of whiskey before going to bed in the winter is actually good for not getting sick. I don't know how it works, but it works. Don't ask me how. Anyways, here is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me besides the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. But, thank you for tuning in tonight. We'll have more for you next week. This is the Nightstalker and the Professor signing off.
And remember, email us your ghost stories at Nightstalkerpodcast at Gmail?
At Gmail.
At Gmail.
Yes, we will be uploading pretty much anywhere we can. So, Nightstalker Podcast at Gmail. This is the Nightstalker and the Professor signing off for tonight. Good night and good luck.